My name's Andrew Burke. I don't know if can you hear me? Yes? No? Am I turned on, so to speak? Is that better?
Oh, I am.
Someone laughed.
Can you hear me now? Am I being amplified? Hello. Yes? Thank you. I'll try and speak up anyway, just so that you can hear me. I'm the Chief Executive of the London Sinfonietta, a colleague and friend of Julia. She's asked me to chair this session, so welcome to the panellists who will introduce themselves shortly. We will try and catch up a bit, so the session will end at about 1:15. I'll ask all the panellists, therefore, to keep your contributions as concise as possible so we can involve you. There will be a bit of talking at you for a bit more, so everybody can contribute. I'm also curious, because this session could easily get quite heady about the possibilities of technology and the things that could be happening in 15 to 10 years' time or so on. And I know I've been in these sessions before where I've been massively inspired by that, but also a little bit sort of bemused by the end of it, because I have to take these big ideas, which seem to imply lots of money and lots of time to implement, and translate them back into my industry or my particular world. And joining those two things can seem very daunting. So I'd really like to challenge the panelists not only to dream big, and for you too to think about the best ideas that you've taken from the session when you do get a chance to reflect back, but also challenge that thinking and think, okay, well, what is the next step? What can we do? What is affordable? What is working? And what, critically, apart from a lovely idea with technology, is turning that idea into money, into revenue, into a potentially more sustainable future for all our sectors. And the only bit of experience I can add into the room, which I won't talk much about, but just to say, so I've got some credibility up here, is we've just been through a one-year process with NESTA in building an app. And I can tell you, the amount of time and effort it takes to do it is not insubstantial. And we're about to find out what difference that app will make in the world, but it's a journey. So on that basis, can I just ask, as we go down the line, you introduce yourself, say what you do briefly, without it being a 5-minute CV, and also focus your experience onto this particular topic. Digital technology, how are we going to use it in the near future? Does it make money for you? Steve.
Hello, I'm Steve Lawson, and the centre of the wheel is I'm a musician, but I find the world curious and I find people who pay me to explore it. I'm a solo performer. I play electric bass most of the time. I do a lot of collaborative improv and play on other people's music, but I also teach. I'm about to start a PhD, hopefully. My proposal went in yesterday. And so, yeah.
Saw that tweet, yeah.
And I am a music journalist and a social technologist. I run an organisation called Amplified, which provides social media support for events in the charity, arts and government sector.
Hi, my name's Emma Quinn. I work at NESTA. I run the Digital R&D Fund for the Arts. It's a collaboration with the Arts Council England and the AHRC. We have supported 52 projects across England to research and develop the use of technologies to either enhance or engage audiences and or to develop business models. So there are 52 projects. I'm trying to be across all of them. Bear with me, I can't remember all of them in depth, and a lot of them may not seem relevant to what we're talking about here. I have funded a lot of work across data, sharing, use of data, engaging audiences with performance, including music education using technology. Some of it sounds quite mundane compared to the talk we've just heard, but it's actually, I feel, kind of quite a lot of real world stuff that a lot of music organisations can tap into. So there's potential there to actually do something with technology, and the learning from these 52 projects will be available for everyone to tap into and learn from.
Good. So my name is Nick Sherrard, and if you look at my business card, the job title says Innovation Consultant. I'd like to say, first of all, I'm not as big of a wanker as that makes me sound out. So basically what we do all day as an agency called Market Gravity, and we work with different sectors, some of them in the media and culture, and some of them in very different fields, and look at the different bits of their world that have been ruined by digital, and the different bits of opportunities that come through as a result. I should also say that I used to work at Sound and Music, and there's 2 of them from Sound and Music down here, so if you're involved with new or experimental music, you should definitely speak speak to these people afterwards. And I guess the one final thing to say before we go into things from me is that I think it's a very good thing that the Hub have called this a provocation panel. Yeah. So we've got some license to be provocative within it. And I would just say one idea first of all, which is, I've been scribbling lots of notes from this morning, which is every area you look at that says we've got big transformation because of digital, when you really look into it, a lot of what's happening is actually a social trend that's much more important than the digital trend. And it's a bit of a comfort zone to always say, oh, well, there's loads and loads of different bits of technology and I can't get my head around it, when the core problem is actually that you're not building services or you're not doing things based around who the real people actually are that you're hoping are going to come into the gigs.
So before Music Ally, I was a singer-songwriter, performer, producer for 10, 12 years. So I've been through the pain. I've collected the email addresses at gigs, and I know how it feels. And then I found Music Ally. They gave me an opportunity, and there I work now. I'm head of research and insight, so I work with record labels and managers and artists and tech companies to help them develop and do interesting stuff. So it's very exciting.
Thank you very much for your introductions. I'd like just to start with this idea of what's practical, what's doable. Nick, you began to touch on that. But if I were to put you in a position of being a consultant to anybody, either in this room, you might all be experts already, or anybody who came to you and said, what should I be doing in this area? What should I not be missing out on? And how can I turn those tactics of using digital technology to engage the audiences in different ways? How can I really make money out of that? What makes a difference? What would you say are the no-brainer things that people should be doing today?
I kind of think the conversation about the technology is a cart before horse situation, because there are much, much bigger concerns at work here about what we do as artists, the purpose of what we do, and its interface with an audience and with the people that are receptive to it, interested to it. There's a whole enormous shift in culture in terms of the purpose of going to a performance. I mean, just from, if I think back to the 80s, and apart from the kind of, that sort of hypermodernist late 20th century idea that big things were better than small things, so everybody wanted to go to stadium gigs just because that's what culture told us to do. There was also the fact that TV was small and crap and limited, and gaming systems didn't really exist. And so music had this artificially dominant position within popular culture. That it was established because the technology, the way that technology developed, supported music being that. And so you could build interest in an artist as an entity that was then manifesting people going to a gig because of that collusion of technology, culture, and just kind of circumstance. So the change now, that people now have way more choices, and that when we put on a gig, the purpose of somebody going to a gig, their purpose and their need to be there is completely different than it was 30 years ago. And if we're trying to compare the two, we're going to screw up, because they're not the same thing. That if you want an immersive experience of a piece of art, that's going to happen. That's going to happen better at home, because music venues are shit. Almost all of them are fucking horrible. They're uncomfortable. They're owned by breweries who want you to stand up because you drink more when you stand up than you do when you sit down. They're focused on getting money out of you in another way. And that's a consequence of property prices increasing. That people can't afford to run venues on the cheap, because that's just, that you can't pay the bills that way. So venues are looking at how they make money out of art, not how they resource good art happening. So the technology side of this, it's sort of, we've got so much to wade through before we get to the utility of technology, that unless we put all that in place, we're going to start going, how do I sell more tickets? More tickets to what? For what? To who? With what money? We've got this massive popular recession going on, and we're expecting growth in a sector that is not vital. You can't expect someone who's just been kicked out of their flat because of the bedroom tax to go, oh, well, but I better get on Songkick and buy some more gig tickets. That's not going to happen. So there's all of this, so I feel like I'm Mr. Miserable, or at least Catweasel, somewhere in the middle of this, going, looking at the modern world, going, this is all shit. Blur got it right when they said modern life is rubbish. There's a lot about being alive now that is really difficult, and is more difficult than it was 30 years ago, and we've got to deal with that as kind of the main body of encounter between human beings, that art is a mediator within. That sounds really highfalutin. I've just written a PhD proposal. That's why. So maybe I'll come back to tech solutions later because I'm meant to be brief. That doesn't ever happen, so sorry about that. But I think we do need. There's another conversation that needs to happen before this one. So my advice would be deal with that and then start looking at how technology interfaces with those big problems.
Okay, so we're all doomed.
Yeah.
Emma,
That's a difficult one to follow.
can you, so from all your experiences of the projects and the NESTA project you've led,
Thanks.
what are the big
Key
headline learnings that you've noticed that really worked from different projects?
So we're starting to disseminate the learning. Basically, all the projects you can find out about them on the website. It's artsdigitalrnd.org.uk. The projects are keeping the information open so you can understand what has worked, what hasn't worked, what went wrong, what went well, so that if you're an arts organisation and you want to tap into certain technologies to maybe you're rethinking your website, you can use this as a sort of benchmark. That's a general overview. But generally speaking, we're looking at things like mobile. People are now glued to their phones, their tablets. That's what people should be thinking about, and it's not about generating specific apps for each thing. Maybe it's making your website mobile friendly, distributing stuff via mobile. We've done a lot of distribution projects. So, for example, Coney, Miracle Theatre have been doing live performances, live streaming. They're not the NT. They're not NT live. These are small rural theatres that are doing this, and you can do the same thing with music, with any performative art form. Also thinking about data sharing. Sharing data is fundamental to the arts sector. One of the projects we've supported, Dance City up in Newcastle, it's a consortium of arts organisations. They are testing sharing their data between them. They found out there's a very small percentage where they have a crossover with audiences. There was something like 10% of the total audience reach was across more than one venue. So that means they're all missing out on about 90% of the audiences they could be tapping into. So there's that reach. It's also thinking about social media. People on social media listen to people talking about things they agree with. They don't listen to someone telling them something they don't like or they don't agree with or don't know about. So it's a really difficult thing to try and get people to attend something they've never experienced before. One of the projects we've supported, Birmingham Town Hall Symphony Hall, they've created an app where they're trying to give away free tickets to people for a music genre they've not listened to before. So if they're a classical music fan, they'll get a free ticket to a jazz or a rock concert or soul gig or whatever it is. Trying to get people to dip their toe in the water. You can channel people through that through technology, but it's how do you do that? Social media is very much a blinkered view of the world. There are so many ways that I think little incremental things that people can do to try and get people to attend live performances. There's too many for me to go into, but what I would say is that it's just about thinking about not just in isolation, your venue, your gig. It's thinking about the bigger picture. It's thinking about how you can share that information with other venues, how you can make sure that you're reaching the audience that likes stuff at their venue, at your venue, and so on and so forth. So that's quite broad-ranging and very scattergun, but there's just so much information out there, and there's so much learning that I think people could tap into and take away with them.
Nick, can you expand what you started talking about the things that people should do first?
Yeah, and I think actually part of that, one of the things that's really exciting about technology just now is the fact that, one, there's all these amazing ideas that are upcoming, so it's an exciting time of new ideas coming forward, but actually, the people who are using all of that stuff first are the people who could be audiences, and there's a massive overlap between people who are really into trying out new technology and people who are really into trying out new music. And so there's a sort of key idea, it's a bit of one of those kind of phrases, but there's a phrase I keep going back to recently on various different projects, which is, people ask, what is the killer app of 2015? What's the one app I should definitely do this year? And actually, the killer app of 2015 is story. If you can tell your story really well, then actually what you can do is you don't have to do all of the technology development. Other people will start showing you how to use it because they'll be talking about you on those different platforms. So Steve, when he's being less miserable, does a very good thing where the way he tells his story means that people like me, and me in particular, then retweet and put his music onto all kinds of different platforms without him lifting a finger. So that in terms of, if you can tell your story really well and start to build a crowd around what you're doing, then there's a fantastic opportunity to understand how your audience can help you take you out into different places. And I guess there's one other thing as well, which just in terms of being very practical, and I think it's a really important idea. I also think it's something you maybe shouldn't put on your application to NESTA sometimes, which is, it's a really key idea, and there's a book that's come out about this written by a guy called Mark Earls, which is called Copy, Copy, Copy. And it's a really important idea with technology, which is don't be scared of copying. And don't copy from other musicians. Copy from film directors, people in other sectors, because there's so much that's out there in the world, and we shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't be sort of trying to pretend that we saw Periscope. We went into a darkened room and we came up with the best way of using Periscope in the world for music. But what we should do is look at how other people are using it and thinking, can I very quickly take that and test it and see if it works with my audience?
Exactly.
Andrew, can I just ask a quick question? How many artists are there in the room? Actual artists? Okay. So I'm assuming labels and music business side, and then what about the tech side? Cool. Well, just looking at it from the artist point of view, because even if you're on the tech side, you can help. That would help you to answer your question directly and to bring everything back down from my point of view to the simple level, and to build on what you guys have been saying, especially about social and story. Two things: know about your fans and communicate with them, right? So to build on that, so what does that mean? Look at the tools around. I mentioned Songkick. You can start a Songkick account today that will push your listings out. You can plug that into Bandcamp and other places, and it will integrate to your other sites. I talked about selling experiences. Bandpage experiences will help you do that. You can sign up right now and use that. Data, SoundCloud. Do you know that on SoundCloud you can see the location of where people are listening and who your listeners are? Go to that location, put a gig on. Who your listeners are, get in touch with them, send them new stuff, ask them to put on a living room gig. That brings me to So Far Sounds. You said social. Jump on what other people are doing that's interesting in the space. Social and content. So Far Sounds have built up this wonderful empire of living room gigs. But what many people don't know, they're also looking at signing publishing and promoting you across the world to their other cities. India, Australia. They've got presence everywhere. Plug into that community. Go to a gig, get to know them, and try and play their gigs. So use the tools that are out there. If not to look forward, look at now and think about how you can use them to get data and then communicate.
Steve, do you want to comment back now with a positive face on it and say what is possible, what you would do yourself, and what you are doing?
I've been sat here nodding, because Karim's point there is a really, really important one. That talk again, conversations about the future are useless if we're not aware of what's happening now, and there's so much technology that already exists. I mean, my feeling in almost all of these conversations is, why isn't anyone talking about Bandcamp? Because for years, Bandcamp was the one digital sales platform that was growing. Everyone was going, the sky's falling, the sky's falling. Bandcamp were going, sorry, we just doubled in the last 6 months, and the 6 months before that. They had 6 monthly exponential growth for like 3 years. They are now a significant portion of the global digital music market. And if you take out the bit that is idiots buying the Eagles' greatest hits, and people buying Taylor Swift albums because it's marketed at them, and if you actually take the bit of the sector that they are even, like they can even function in, because Taylor Swift can't put her music on Bandcamp because the ridiculous terms of copyright around the way that it's managed wouldn't allow it. It's not malleable enough to do that. So if you take the sector that can exist on Bandcamp, they're like 80% of the market, and it's growing, and you can do ticketing through that. So what Quinn was saying about using new technology to manage ticketing, I'm able to bundle anything I want with my ticket pricing. I can change it as it goes along. I can put a PDF with it with an explanation of what's going to happen at the gig. I can bundle music with it. I can give away albums with tickets, because why wouldn't I? What idiot wouldn't just kind of go, great, I want to sell tickets, great, I'll give them as much as I can. There's so much in that. I was one of the first 3 people in the world to set up, to trial the Bandcamp subscription service, which is great. And just means I can keep piling music out to people and have a conversation with them. Because the problem with a lot of this stuff about aggregated data is that actually what you need to do before you get there is talk to the people who like what you do. Make it so that them coming to your gig is a social event, and there is a social transaction that is meaningful and is not driven by novelty, nostalgia, or some kind of mythological stardom, narcissistic nonsense. Because that's great if you're Taylor Swift, that's fine, people will turn up to Hyde Park. I don't care about Taylor Swift. I don't care what happens in her life. She's not in the same business as me. Simon Cowell is not in the same industry as me. They don't do anything that I care about. Apple Music is Lidl. I'm working in a farmer's market. I don't want music on there in the same way that if I made cakes at home, I wouldn't be going, I wonder if Tesco's will stock these. That's not what I'm doing. I don't give a shit. So how do I have a conversation with the people who turn up to my farmer's market? Because then, piracy isn't even a word that exists in my world. Everything of mine's Creative Commons, so you can't pirate it. You can give it to your friends, and you're helping me. I'm going to thank you if you do that. So the technology is there in order to build community at a scalable level. I love that Emma mentioned what's happening in theatre. Theatre is so much more interesting than music for stuff that's going on. Start going to local theatre, to kind of independent level theatre productions and realise just how mundane your gigs are. No one's coming to your gigs because they're dull. People are going to Coney shows because it's this incredible immersive experience. The last Coney show that was on was a thing called Early Days of a Better Nation. I went twice, 2 nights in a row, and I wanted to go a third time. I nearly ended up getting divorced because I was trying to sneak out of a family thing to go to a theatre gig because it was so good. That hasn't happened with a musician in 20 years. So their innovative tech use is really great, but they're also building an experience so that there is something that you're aiming towards in this building community. You're building community with digital tools, but the payoff has to be there. People have to show up and go, that was an amazing night out. I felt cherished. I felt cared for within that environment.
Can I just, I don't want to hijack so much, but I just want to jump on what Steve said, and it's so on point about, you know, you don't want to know about Taylor Swift, but you want to know about your favourite bands, and they want to build you and the other people like you as their small community, and then you sell and tailor to that community. You know, that's a big theme now, and Ryan Leslie, I advise everyone, did a really good interview at Midem, where he's made something like 500, I think a couple of $100,000 gross by selling directly to 12,000 people who are his core fan base. And the way he communicates to them is by text message. He's a coder, he built his own communication tool. But it doesn't mean you can't. You can go to a coder and they can build it for you, but it's the fact that he did it. And I'll talk to you by phone, and he has a system which manages it. But that helps cultivate that tight circle of people. You know, anything you can do to generate that circle and talk to it is a very good idea.
I'd like to ask you here if you've got comments or observations or questions for these 4 visionaries, and do prepare them, please, or experiences that begin to answer the core question of this session. I'll come to you in a second, but I just want to ask one more thing of you 4 while people get their thoughts together. What knowledge or experience have you got of ways in which income has been generated other than building that relationship and encouraging people then to buy more tickets for the live experience, which is the kind of basic hypothesis of this session? Do you know of good examples where the relationship building has led to income streams for artists or bands or music groups outside of the just buy a ticket and come to my live gig end point?
It's an interesting one. One everyone always goes for is things around crowdfunding and things, but I think the important thing with that is it's quite easy to think that's entirely about giving. And I think actually when you look at people who do it really well, what they're really selling is experiences, whether it is you can get closer to the artist in some particular way, or you can have access to something that somebody else doesn't have. So I guess that the key thing around it comes back to that same idea of if you understand your community, and I think that's quite a big point. So we were talking about social media before, which everyone thinks is about getting as many people as possible. If actually what you want to do is to sustain a particular project that you're working on, that might actually not be a huge number of people, but if you can really grow to understand them, then you can see whether the right thing is to do more gigs, or whether the right thing to do is to involve them through a Kickstarter campaign or something. But if you can really have the understanding of who that community is, then you can find the right ways to generate money through it.
Any other good examples? Yeah.
2 words, I suppose. Amanda Palmer. You know, read her autobiography. It's fascinating, and it's not about the Kickstarter campaign. It's not about technology. It's about her approach to her fans, and she sees them as this web of people who help each other and help her. She pushes out a request or something to this web every now and then to tighten it, because then the other nodes of the web talk to each other and help her and spread her music and help each other. And that, you know, just knowing, stimulating that web and creating that fan base has led to all sorts of opportunities and kind of income streams for her that have nothing to do with music. It's, yeah, that's what I'd say. It's a fascinating read, that book. Including the Kickstarter, which is very famous.
Pretty much everybody I know who's making art sustainably is doing it because they're focusing on spending less money rather than increasing their income. That actually there's an enormous amount of money wasted within the music economy on people spending things in a kind of pre-millennial way. So paying for advertising without there being any kind of sort of way of monitoring how that works. Or paying for services like radio pluggers without it being predicated on what they actually do. The idea that I'm paying someone for a week of radio plugging work when I can actually see what they've done, it's like, well, no, it's fine. Well, I'll pay you per play. Let's do it like that. I've never found a radio plugger who'll do that, so I don't use them. Because otherwise it's speculative, and speculation doesn't work at low scale. You just don't have the money to do that. If you're Warner, you can afford to speculate on everything because it's a spread bet. That's how major record labels work. They spread their investment, And one person pays off, but everybody else is still in debt. They don't pay off anyone's debts with it. There's no year of jubilee in the major recording industry. They just use that. They use that debt as a mechanism of not paying anyone else. But they only need one Elton John to put out a record every few years in order to keep the money piling in. So at a low scale, not spending money is as good a way of increasing your net income as increasing your income is. And so I think being efficient. And the single best model for efficiency is community. The artists working together, that while independent artists see themselves as in competition with one another, we're all screwed. When we behave in that way and we manifest what we do in that way, that's terrible. When we're generous with it, we build community. I used to say this at everything, and I did the calculation again recently, and it's not true anymore. But I used to say that I sold more of other people's music for them than I did of my own because of the conversation I had about it online. For 3 or 4 years, that was true. That I could see it, and I've got the stats to back it up, that I was selling 2 of anyone else's albums for every one of mine because I spent all my time talking about other people's music. I still spend more time talking about other people's music than I do about my own. So I see myself as a node within the music economy, and me making money is about everybody making money. That if music does well, my music will do well. My music can do well without anybody else doing well, and that's less interesting. I'm much more interested in a rising tide floating all the boats than I am in some kind of trickle-down thing.
That kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier about the data sharing. It's if you've got across a consortium of arts organisations, you've got only a 10% share of that audience. That means 90% of those people you could be tapping into. So by sharing that information, sharing the love, and targeting people, they've been to a gig at that venue, they might well go to a similar gig at your venue. Do you know, it's that kind of thing. It's about opening things up and being a bit more generous with your information, because whatever you give comes back, tenfold or whatever. And I think, so for want of repeating myself, we are, a lot of the projects we've supported are about engaging audiences. Through engaging audiences, you engage them to potentially spend money on tickets or merchandise or whatever it is you're selling. And you also develop business models through that as well. A lot of the projects are coming to fruition now, so I can't say for sure how many are working and how many aren't, but keep your eyes peeled. That these business models will be out there for people to look at and adapt and use for themselves.
Thank you. Okay, your turn. Has anybody got any comments that reinforces what you've heard or contradicts it? Or any bloody good ideas, that add to the knowledge pool in the room this afternoon? Thank you. You say who you are as well, please, and all that protocol.
Hi. Hello.
There we are. Hello.
Stuart Elliker, I manage a venue down the road, 229. Given what Steve said initially, I would think he'll probably get his PhD and maybe become a politician because it was bollocks, basically, and he didn't answer the question. I run a local venue, and we've invested thousands in technology and PA and to create a unique and great listening environment for artists and the customers. So to sort of generalise and say that live venues are crap, possibly you're not quite in touch with what's going on. There are a lot of good venues in London. We're pushed by promoters, pushed by bands to raise the bar in technology and invest in PA so that we give everyone a good listening experience to encourage them to come back. And certainly I've worked with a lot of promoters and lots of creative talent, certainly at the grassroots level, in trying to promote them, and I can name a few artists, but I won't. But it's just a comment, that's all. The only thing I did enjoy from what you said was your acronym about Lidl's and Farmers Market, which was funny.
No, I mean, there are some lovely venues around, for sure. I mean, and those are the ones I'm happy to play in. But across the board, the quality of venues they're struggling just because of the cost of having a venue, particularly in London. That the conversation amongst musicians it's so pervasive that musicians are going, we keep playing these shitty whole venues, and the audience are kind of, the stage is obscured by stuff, and it's really hard. I don't say that glibly at all, and I really, really appreciate the venues that do make it work, and there are some beautiful venues around, but across the board there's a dearth of them, and it's certainly and considering that staging and that environment as the thing that people are going to come to, as opposed to sitting at home in the comfort of their house in this incredibly immersive technological environment, that as a use of tech most venues don't match up as an experience. And so you have to create some other reason for being there. And community is the best reason for being there, meeting with people. And meeting with venues. I mean, the feeling that you're cared about by the venue is a really key one. Because of what you said, I want to come and see your venue. That's great. You sound like someone who cares. I meet an awful lot of venue owners who don't. So that's brilliant. And I hope that your success becomes a model for other people to go, great, let's create a space in which the encounter between the art and the audience is one that is meaningful, and where that is foregrounded rather than that being the bait to get people in to come and buy beer. Because that's horrible.
Thank you. Sounds like Steve will be performing there soon.
It is a nice venue, by the way, and sounds good. I've been a few times, so yeah, I'd recommend you have a look.
Thank you. The chap in the striped blue shirt, and then back over here with the chap with the green top. Has two at once. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you. My name's Simeon. I work for the Audience Agency. We were actually lucky enough to be funded by the Digital R&D Fund. I won't go into great detail about that, but there might be an interesting thing coming out of that. We're looking at a way of essentially getting around the vastly inflated prices of getting data out of Twitter these days. So watch this space to kind of generate a kind of understanding of your network better. So I'll just say that because otherwise I'll probably end up talking like nonsense. So yeah, we have data scientists basically in the project as well who deal with that, which I also think is really important in the kind of community, the industry. So that was my kind of other point. I think everything everyone said seems to there's a common theme around understanding your audiences and choosing the right channel for your music and your audience. And I just want to kind of echo that. And just not to sound defensive of data analytics, but just to understand the difference between analytics and what that will tell you, generally more behaviorally, and that kind of qualitative feedback of understanding that kind of core who are speaking to you is really, really important. And one small provocative thing, perhaps, I don't think, I agree, people aren't in competition. Actually, you could say there is no art or music market, there is a leisure market, and people have a social time, and we need to understand how they want to behave in that social space, and a lot of that is going to be around arts and culture. But if we think about it purely as just an art thing, and that being the market, I think you might be missing out on something.
Thank you very much. And I would just save up any responses. Yeah?
Oh, hi, thank you. My name is Matthew Harden, aka Glamour. I am a conceptual composer. I run my own small business, making my work in collaboration with large groups of crew. I'd like to back Steve up slightly on the venue thing, just coming back to you. I've stopped playing in nearly all music venues, apart from the Barbican or the Royal Festival Hall, simply because they don't have the backup for the technology that I require. When I write music, I write with visuals in mind. I write in both sound and light. And it's almost impossible to find a music-based venue that will even countenance me going in there with my crew with maybe up to 9 or 10 projectors. And, it's just impossible. So I have to work in arts venues and galleries, mainly in galleries or public spaces, or, it feels to me like within music, the music industry itself, the live industry, there's not an understanding of the fact that we want to do more than just put a singer in front of a backdrop and have the visuals as a backdrop. So performance technology is something that I feel that venues have to really begin to understand more, whether it's interactive technology, visual technology. There's so many performance but I mean, if you look at modern dance, modern contemporary dances and theatre is where this is really understood. So musicians like myself find myself moving into those spaces much more. And secondly, I'd like to say, you guys, tech guys, do not underestimate the power of privacy. A lot of my promotions, I have absolutely, I don't set up a Facebook event. All I do is chat about it, maybe through social media slightly. I don't have tickets online. I've moved completely away from that, and I have found that people are very excited by not having their data collected, not being herded to a bar to buy beer, not being sold at continually, not being targeted and marketed in any way whatsoever, just hearing about something and going along because they're interested. People are still capable of that.
Thank you. Yes, do come back. Yeah.
I've actually got 3 things. Thanks, Matt. That I don't completely agree with you about the data thing, but it seems to suit your audience, which is the important thing. And we always tell people, you know, be polite. If you have their email, treat it with respect. Give them the opt-out. Don't bombard them with stuff. But I do think a lot of people still don't mind trading privacy for experiences, like I was talking about earlier. And, you know, even coming from both sides, creative and fan side. The second thing was, I love to see your show. And have you heard of a band called Phantom? They do a great kind of show with the reinterpretation of their movement. And that led me to think one thing, Andrew, I wanted to tell the room. It's not directly related to live, but everyone should possibly check out what Music Tech Fest are doing, because some great performance stuff comes out of their weekends, and there was just one in Scandinavia. So I just wanted to build on what Matt said.
Any other responses to what people have just said?
There's a couple of things. I mean, I think one of the things that the point around privacy brings out is a lot of the time what's been happening so far is you share your data with an arts organisation or with a music venue and you get spammed with just messages that aren't really targeted at all. And increasingly people are intolerant of that. And it's definitely some venues who are changing that and understand it's about growing a community, but that's been definitely an experience, and therefore there's a lot of people out there today who are quite cautious about handing over data as a result of that, as a result of that bad experience. And I guess the related point as well, which is it's great to have all the initiatives that are around venues sharing data, but one of the big problems I think from a fan perspective is that there's a bizarre thing just now where you can go to a publicly subsidized concert in a publicly subsidised venue, and afterwards you've got no follow-up at all from the people who are performing, and it's not actually their fault, it's because they haven't got access to any way to communicate with that audience. And that's been a thing we've been complaining about for ages, it seems like, and I just feel like if we've got this big driver around data, one of the asks we should be making of people like the Arts Council is just to stop that it has to stop, and if you can't do it as a full-on data sharing agreement straight away, then it should be something that's more ad hoc, and we should make sure that customers have the ability to tick a box that says, I'm happy for the artist that I'm coming to see to be able to send me something afterwards.
I think just to chip in from our point of view, just so you know, certainly in my experience, we are an NPO-funded organisation, and our relationship, even with our very close venues with whom we have a relationship with, I mean, I love the idea of generously sharing data, but my experience, it may be different for you in your work or your sector. The reality is people hold on to data for grim death, and they do not want to share it. They do not want to give it away, and they will, and we would be the same, I think. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying, and quite often people are hiding behind the Data Protection Act as the reason this can't happen. Yes, so microphone down here, thanks.
Hello,
Just give it a go. I think they're on it.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Victoria from Sound of Music, and pretty much I was going to say the same thing actually. That although we keep talking about kind of sharing data and how important that is, and this shared understanding and cross-referencing, actually the thing that artists across the board are finding are that they can't access their own data, that venues are very precious of that information, that there's no sharing between venues if it's a touring program, and. Sorry. Okay, great. I was just saying from the problem we find from artists across the board, whether it's musicians or visual artists, theatre, is that venues are fairly reluctant to often share the artist's information about their own work across venues, if it's a touring programme, with other organisations. People are incredibly precious about this information as it's theirs. And actually what we're trying to encourage is people to share that information, because a shared understanding will lead to greater impact. Actually, you having, and you know, the audience agency do a great job on that with the audience finder, but you know, you having 30 email addresses opposed to having 3,000 if you share it across the UK is going to make an incredible impact for sustainable arts. And as Sound of Music, what we're working towards is making all of our data open data, and that's something we hope to start this year, which will be accessible to all of our musicians and to the greater world and to venues. And if they want to find something out, it isn't our data to hold. It's ours to kind of bring together and make relevant and important. So I agree with what you're saying.
There's a bubbling up response here.
Yeah, the whole conversation around data is a really interesting one. I think your point was a really key one about the role of data analysis, and there was a lovely role, I don't know if it still exists, but at one point Last FM had a data griot, a data storyteller, somebody who took their data and interpreted it as a set of stories about people's relationships with music. And I kind of loved that. I like that. I like this idea that actually data storytelling is a role. Because in a kind of automaton way, we can actually be lied to by data. That we can be told that a music economy is doing well or doing badly based on a handful of tiny tiny entities with a massive influence. So I remember the year that Coldplay pushed their release date back over the end of the tax year, and the stock price of their record label plummeted as a result. I mean, it's like because of one band. And again, I don't care what they do. Whether they sell 3 million copies or 1 million copies, that doesn't affect the sustainability of grassroots music activity, but it will impact that gross figure, so the BPI can tell us that the sky is falling, because a handful of huge acts have had their sales drop, and that doesn't matter. There was that big conversation at the end of last year about the fact that until the Taylor Swift record came out, there had been no million-selling records in America. And you went, yeah, but how is that even a thing? Because we're not talking about spread. We're not talking about how much of the music economy is shifted outside of the bit that SoundScan measures, which is enormous, again, because over 90% of Bandcamp stuff isn't reported to SoundScan. Sales at gigs. We've been talking about the live music environment growing. Sales that happen at gigs don't get reported to SoundScan. There's a huge amount of music economic activity happening outside of that which is measured by the BPI and the RIAA, and they're not acknowledging that because they don't care about that, because they're lobbying organisations. So they use data as a weapon, not as a way of telling intelligent stories. So being able to slice data, being able to interpret data, being able to use it, so sharing it for the purpose of storytelling, turning it into information, rather than it being a game of who's got the biggest numbers in Excel, which is not an interesting game at all, because the majors are always going to win, because they game it. They own that game. So we need to take their numbers out of it and go, okay, well, what's happening at our level? And if it's spread, then we can use the metaphor of biodiversity and go, well, this is great. More music by more people is happening in more places. How can we make that sustainable? Let's not get into an argument about growth on that kind of scale, because fast growth is also, when we're talking metaphors, fast growth is cancer. That fast-growing entities can be negative just as much as they can be positive. And so we need to tell stories with data. And it's important that we have people who are interpreting that and are in conversation around that and are able to turn it from data to information to wisdom, and then build a music environment on top of that.
Thank you. Does anybody have any pushback, that you may be advocated here that somehow technology is something we should all be engaging with in different ways to build communities which will build income, will make all our ecosystems sustainable at whatever level working in whichever style? Does anybody kind of go, no, I think this is a fundamentally wrong idea. Let's just go back to, as Julia said to me beforehand, somebody said, let's just go back to posters and leaflets, and just make it sort of retro, Does anybody feel very strongly in that direction? Specifically about that question, yes? At the back? Sorry, at the very back, sitting against the lady sitting against the wooden panels.
Thank you. The Venus Bushfires, Helen Parker Jane. I'm a composer and a musician. And I think quite often, with the way the industry has changed over the last 5 years, it's easy for musicians to say, I don't have this opportunity because of that technology or whatever, or I can't afford the marketing or advertising or whatever. But I think that's an excuse. And I think as an industry, we've forgotten to be really inspiring. And I think a lot of people creating music, I created an album about 8 years ago, and I remember thinking, or maybe 10 years, that MySpace. It wasn't good enough. The album wasn't good enough. It was crap. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was going to change the world. And to be honest, 99.9% of the albums that I do hear, or the shows that I do see, are absolute crap and trash. And people should just actually go back home and think about something else to do. But that being said, I just think that artists need to go back to the drawing board and think, is it good enough? If nobody's inspired, go back to the drawing board, and not to be afraid of that. That's not a bad thing necessarily, it's a good thing, and we should see things differently. I think once we inspire ourselves and our local community, then we can possibly inspire people going forward, and then technology comes in after that, after you've done the groundwork, and when the person themselves says, yes, I like what you do, I'll come to your show, maybe then you can have my email address, not the other way around.
Thank you very much.
I think, can I just say it like that?
Yes.
That made me remember an interview with David Gray. I think, you know, the album, I can't remember if it was called Babylon or not, but the one with that track was his 6th or 7th album, and he'd had a deal before that and come out of the deal. And he just said, right, I'm going to redo everything, the way I approach everything to do with writing music, and then I'm going to give up if it doesn't work. But because he did that, back to the drawing board, he's now a megastar, you know, so.
Thank you. Everybody who had their hands up for a question up to now, can just put your hands back up, and we just take one sentence statements from you, and then can you be prepared to sum up perhaps what you think is the most important next step that you've got out of this conversation? Anybody who wants to say something now, just put your hand up and we'll go around you quickly. Can you make your sentences really short, just to get the idea across? Thank you.
Well, I work at a grassroots venue in New Cross, and I just want to hear like one point from each of you, like what we can do tomorrow when I go back to work to start collecting more data, make more use of it. Because I love all the ideas, but I want to know some like hard-hitting like things I can do tomorrow.
Brilliant question. The lady here, thank you. Microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I'm a promoter and I promote in Stewart's venue, and I think you need to use technology and old school stuff. Some of the bands I'm putting on, they're doing really great things. They create their own posters, they send invitations to the handmade invitations to the music industry. You know, people take notice of that kind of stuff, as well as bombarding them with emails and all the social media.
Thank you. The gent at the front here with the grey t-shirt.
I was partly sort of picking up on what Steve had said about the experience and looking at theatre, and what Nick has said about sort of stealing from other spaces. And, you know, you look at what's happening in things like secret cinema, and I guess one of my comment is really about the opportunity as well to do with location. You know, whether or not it's an artist actually choosing very carefully somewhere that works for that piece, or whether it's a beach or rooftop or a park or in a cave or wherever it may be, that I think there's enormous opportunity to take on some amazing locations and provide that extra bit of experience. And the technology obviously helps by being able to give people location if it's in the middle of a forest or wherever it may be. Oh, and the other point was actually what Karim had said, was you can then also start introducing more tech to the experience. You know, I mean, to actually bring virtual reality into the real as well could be quite interesting. But I think there's more tech that could be brought to the events as well. So.
Thank you. Anybody else want to say something? Yes, chap with the patterned shirt.
Hi, my name's Sam Lee. I'm a musician and a promoter under the NESTA Collective. And I'd just like to ask whether you could talk perhaps about the relationship between the promoter and the artist, and how the two can work hand in hand, particularly the promoter with the expertise and skills they have to encourage a greater dialogue and community and relationship between the artists, so that they can help support the venue that helps support them, and the two can grow hand in hand.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Fine. One more, sorry. There we are. Yes.
Hi, I'm Dave, and I'm going bald slowly. I just find something about the data collection and aggregation quite an unsettling thing. And I know there's some very interesting stuff that's happening around audience analysis and kind of behavioural and driving extra sales, but I find something really unsettling about that. And I also find that lots of other kind of industries and other places that have equally been kind of stepping the waters into digital and trying to work out where they fit and how things operate are finding there's a bit more of a backlash about that, particularly around kind of ownership of data and privacy concerns. And I just wondered where people might be thinking around that.
Thank you very much. So panel, can you just either reply to any of those points you've heard in your closing statement? You may pick one you really responded to, but all of you, can you just give one piece of advice that we can all be doing tomorrow morning to change our habits and behaviours in a good way in the area of this conversation?
Long sentence. Be practical. Take inspiration from other people. Be pragmatic. Use your time wisely. Know what the tools can offer you. Look at them. And to the man in the back, let your mate do it for you if it makes you uncomfortable. Find people who believe in you. I mean that. That's what people do. You know, to the first part of your statement. And we'll talk afterwards.
So it's a similar theme. We're going to make it quite particular, which I think the best piece of advice I've been given, and best piece of advice I've passed on to other people, is within your week is to literally carve out some time, whether it's 2 hours, whether you can do a little bit more, where you try something new each week. And to that point, that could be a digital thing, or it could be just a new tactic, a new way, or a new place to put a poster or to put communication. But just by building it into your week, you just build in that sense of trying new things as you go through, and that then draws out a sense of realism around what actually you're ever going to be able to do by yourself and what you're going to need somebody else to do, what you need a particular type of promoter to work with you around, but just building in that time where you just say, I'm going to try something new, and if it doesn't work, I'll stop it, I'll just turn it off. But the whole idea is to build in some time around that. I could go on for ages around the data backlash. So we're in the middle of these two things. So beyond music, there's a real sense of data being used in all kinds of new ways. And I think there's a massive issue around trust. I can't go into that as to where we end up, but that's definitely one of the key things that are coming through. And there's probably opportunities on both sides, to be practical. So for some people who really hate the data being shared at all, you can promote and make that a part of your story. This is the way that you work. For others that are very relaxed about it, then they have a quite different expectation around things should be tailored around me. So they're changing times, and there is no one big answer to all those different issues. But I think the one practical thing you can do is build in some time to experiment.
What I would say is advice that was given by Rob Grieg, who was at the Royal Opera House. He said, don't reinvent the wheel. There's platforms out there already. You can tap into them. You don't need to have your own video channel. You've got YouTube. You can just tap into that, or Vimeo. There are social media feeds. You can gather data from those. You can get people who are watching what you're doing, or following you through social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever it is. So don't invest in tons of money in reinventing the wheel. Use what's already there, that's already being supported. And in terms of data, yeah, I mean, it's a mixture of the two. I personally quite like giving my data to venues that the support acts that I like to go and see, whatever art form that's in. Other people don't, and I think it's true. You have to do a mixture of that kind of online marketing as well as that real world poster flyering stuff. It's not one or the other, it's both.
I think it's important to use technology to listen to your audience as much as to push things out to them and to try and get them to give you money. I think it's an opportunity to try and understand them, to build relationships and friendships, for there to be an exchange of care and an exchange of meaning between you and them. Your desire to be heard doesn't make you worth listening to. And a lot of the frustration amongst musicians is that we go, but I really want people to hear me. I don't care. That's not what's going to make me want to listen to you, because everybody wants to be listened to. That's great. That's good that you do. I'm glad that you believe in what you're doing. But that's not what's going to make what you do meaningful and make it so that when people come to see you perform, that A, they're going to get to that point, and B, that that's going to be something special and was worthwhile for them anyway. Finding ways for them supporting what you do, the people who believe in it, that then the performance becomes part of that transaction. A consideration of what is the work, what is it that you do? Is it in the song? Is it in the performance? Is the relationship part of the work? For me, the relationship I have with the people who listen to my music, it's a Venn diagram with a very, very loose edge. There are a lot of people who are more interested in me as a person than they are in the music that I make. I had a wonderful email from a guy once who, I put out a live record and he went, at last, I've been wanting to buy something of yours for years and I hadn't liked any of it this far. And I was like, hold on a minute, that means you've spent the last 8 albums listening to them, knowing that you, or expecting them to be crap, but wanting to love it. That's an incredible gift. The investment of time that he put into what I did is worth far more than however much money he spent on the record. I need to cherish that, but it was technology that made that transaction possible. It was the fact that I was open and available to talk to him via Twitter and Facebook, that the conversation was two-way. I wasn't using them as a broadcast platform. The technology that is already there to have those conversations needs to be explored, and needs to be explored from a perspective of mutual understanding and mutual care, not just from how can I get these people to give me more money. Because that's not engaging for them, that's not interesting.
Karim, Nick, Emma, Steve, and you, thanks very much for a stimulating session. Enjoy your lunch.